The Galactic Military Academy's recruitment brochures never mentioned the MK7 mind scanner. Funny how that worked. They'd show you the gleaming spires, the state-of-the-art training facilities, the diverse student body representing 47 different species across 12 star systems. What they didn't show you was the sterile white chamber in Sub-Level 7 where dreams went to die. Commander Vex loved that chamber. The 8-foot-tall Craxian would pace outside it like a predator, his forearms clasped behind his back, waiting for the inevitable screams. His species had evolved from something that looked like a praying mantis crossed with a particularly vindictive accountant, and Vex had perfected the art of looking disappointed in recruits before they'd even failed. The Breaker, as cadets called it, sat in the center of that white room like a technological altar to psychological torment. Banks of sensors, quantum processors, and neural interface nodes all designed for one purpose: to crack open a mind and see what made it tick. The official designation was Comprehensive Psychological Fitness Evaluation Protocol, but everyone knew what it really was. A 97% failure rate didn't lie. The current batch of recruits huddled outside the chamber like condemned prisoners. There was Cadet Blurp, whose gelatinous slime species communicated through chemical releases, currently emanating what could generously be called pure terror pheromones. Cadet Zix kept clicking her mandibles in nervous patterns that sounded like a broken computer trying to boot up. The crystalline twins, Shard and Fractal, were literally vibrating at frequencies that made nearby equipment hum in sympathy. Then there was Jake Murphy. "So," Jake said, looking around at his fellow cadets with the casual interest of someone waiting for a bus, "is there like a snack bar around here? Because I've been up since 0500 and that protein paste they serve in the mess hall is not cutting it." Commander Vex's compound eyes swiveled to focus on the human with the kind of attention usually reserved for particularly interesting bacteria. Humans were new to the galactic community. This was only the third year of their exchange program, and frankly, most species weren't sure what to make of them yet. "Cadet Murphy." Vex's voice carried the authority of someone who'd watched 1,000 dreams shatter. "Perhaps you'd like to review the preparatory materials regarding today's evaluation." Jake pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "Oh yeah, this thing. Comprehensive Psychological Evaluation to Determine Fitness for Military Service." "Sounds pretty standard. Do I need to fast beforehand? Because I already ate breakfast, but I could probably skip lunch if that's better for the results." The other cadet stared at him like he'd just volunteered to juggle plasma grenades. Cadet Blurp released what could only be described as second-hand embarrassment scent, which somehow smelled like rotting eggs mixed with disappointment. "The scanner," Vex continued, his tone suggesting Jake had missed something crucial, "will examine your memories, analyze your psychological responses, and determine whether you possess the mental fortitude required for military service." "Cool," Jake nodded. "How long does it usually take? I've got study group at 1400, and we're covering advanced xenobiology. Did you know that Craxians actually have 5 different types of photoreceptors? That's wild, right?" Commander Vex's mandibles twitched. In his 15 years at the academy, he'd never seen a cadet approach the scanner with anything resembling casual curiosity. Fear? Yes. Resignation, certainly. Occasionally someone would try false bravado, but it never lasted past the first neural probe. But genuine interest in snack availability? That was new. "Perhaps," Vex said slowly, "you should observe the procedure first. Educational purposes." Jake shrugged. "Sure thing. Do you guys have popcorn?" Dr. Nerlix had been the Academy's head psychologist for 23 years, and he looked every day of it. His Cerebrand species naturally possessed enlarged craniums to accommodate their enhanced brain capacity. But stress had given him a permanent twitch in his left eye that made him look like he was perpetually winking at tragedy. "The scanner," Dr. Nerlix explained to Jake while reviewing case files, "is not simply a medical device. It's a deep psychological excavation tool. It doesn't just read surface thoughts. It dives into the foundational memories that shape personality, analyzes trauma responses, evaluates decision-making patterns under extreme stress." Jake nodded along while unwrapping what appeared to be a candy bar. "Sounds thorough. Do you guys keep statistics on it? I love a good data set." Dr. Nerlix's eye twitched harder. He opened a file labeled Previous Subjects, Psychological Intervention Required. The folder was approximately 3 inches thick. Cadet Xiphylon Zephyrian species. Entered the scanner last semester as a promising tactical officer candidate. Emerged only capable of communicating in prime numbers in the periodic table. He's currently working in the Academy's accounting department, where his condition is actually considered beneficial. That's nice that he found his niche, Jake said, completely missing the horror of the situation. Cadet Veltar, crystal compound species. Her people store memories and fractal patterns across their crystalline structure. The scanner attempted to map these patterns and induced what we can only describe as catastrophic resonance failure. She now shatters into anxiety fragments whenever someone mentions the word evaluation. We have to use synonyms around her. Jake paused mid-chew. What kind of synonyms? Assessment, review, analysis, examination, appraisal, Dr. Nerlix began. Somewhere in the distance they heard the sound of something crystalline breaking, followed by a muffled voice saying, "Not again!" "We're working on it," Dr. Nerlix sighed. Then there was Cadet Flux, a plasma entity. His species exists in a state of controlled energy, thoughts manifesting as electromagnetic patterns. The scanner tried to analyze these patterns and somehow gave him performance anxiety about his own existence. He's been seeing a therapist for 6 months and still flinches when someone turns on a light switch. "Wow," Jake said. "You'd think they'd have worked out the bugs by now." "This is like what, the 7th version?" "The MK7, yes. Each iteration has been more sophisticated, more thorough, more..." Dr. Nerlix searched for the word. "Traumatic?" Jake suggested helpfully. "I was going to say comprehensive, but yes." Commander Vex appeared in the doorway like a bad omen in uniform. "Dr. Nerlix, are you filling Cadet Murphy's head with defeatist propaganda?" "I'm providing context for the evaluation process," Dr. Nerlix replied stiffly. "Context," Vex repeated. "Interesting word for excuses. The scanner serves a vital purpose. Military service requires individuals who can function under psychological pressure. If they can't handle having their minds examined, how can they handle combat?" Jake raised his hand like he was in class. "Question. Do the people who designed this thing know that 97% failure rate usually indicates a problem with the test, not the test takers?" The room went very quiet. Commander Vex's forearms slowly crossed in what was unmistakably a defensive posture. Dr. Nerlix made a small noise that might have been a suppressed laugh or a sob. "The failure rate," Vex said, with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a particularly slow child, "indicates that military service is not for everyone. We're looking for exceptional individuals." "Right. But if 97% of your applicants are failing, you're either recruiting from the wrong population or your screening method is fundamentally flawed. Has anyone done a statistical analysis of the test's reliability? Control groups, validation studies, peer review?" Dr. Nerlix stared at Jake with the expression of someone witnessing a miracle. In 23 years, no one had ever questioned the scanner's methodology. They just accepted it as an immutable force of nature, like gravity or disappointing cafeteria food. "The scanner," Vex repeated slowly, "has been refined through 7 iterations by the galaxy's finest technological minds." "Sure," Jake nodded. "But have they published their methodology? Because from a purely statistical standpoint, a test with a 3% pass rate is either measuring something incredibly rare, or it's not measuring what it thinks it's measuring." Commander Vex made a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve. "Perhaps we should proceed with the demonstration. Theory is no substitute for experience." Jake finished his candy bar and tossed the wrapper in a recycling bin. "Sounds good. Lead the way." As they walked toward the scanner chamber, Dr. Nerlix whispered to Jake, "In 30 years of psychology, I've never seen anyone approach this with scientific curiosity instead of existential dread." Jake shrugged. "I figure either I'll pass and move on or I'll fail and find something else to do. Either way, I'll learn something interesting about how my brain works. That's kinda cool, right?" Dr. Nerlix's eye stopped twitching for the first time in years. The scanner chamber looked like what would happen if a hospital room in a science fiction movie set had an extremely sterile baby. White walls curved seamlessly into a white ceiling, broken only by the soft blue glow of monitoring displays and the ominous bulk of the MK7 itself. The machine dominated the center of the room like a technological throne. Banks of neural interface nodes surrounded a reclining chair that looked deceptively comfortable, until you noticed the restraint systems built into the armrests. Quantum processors hummed with barely contained power, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with potential energy. Today's demonstration, Commander Vex announced with the enthusiasm of someone hosting a particularly morbid game show, will showcase the scanner's capabilities across multiple species psychologies. The observation gallery filled with Academy staff, visiting dignitaries, and the remaining cadets who weren't scheduled for scanning today. Jake found a seat in the front row and looked around with interest. "Is this like a live surgery amphitheater?" he asked Dr. Nerlix. "That's actually pretty educational." "It's more like a public execution," Dr. Nerlix muttered. But Jake had already turned his attention to the first victim. "Sorry, volunteer." Cadet Blurp approached the scanner with all the enthusiasm of someone walking toward their own execution. His gelatinous form rippled with nervous energy, releasing stress pheromones that made several observers in the gallery start unconsciously holding their breath. "Specimen 1, Commander Vex narrated. Cadet Blurp of the Slime Collective. Species characterized by chemical communication and distributed nervous system architecture." Blurp settled into the chair with a wet, squelching sound. The neural interfaces activated, sending tendrils of scanning energy into his translucent form. For a moment, everything seemed fine. Then Blurp started screaming. Well, not screaming exactly, since slimes don't have vocal cords. Instead, he began releasing distress chemicals at such intensity that the chamber's air filtration system kicked into overdrive with an audible whir. The scanner displays lit up with incomprehensible data streams as the machine attempted to map a psychology distributed across a non-centralized nervous system. Warning lights began flashing as Blurp's form started losing cohesion, literally melting under the psychological pressure. "Fascinating," Commander Vex observed clinically. Subject exhibits classic cascade failure pattern when confronted with centralized consciousness paradigm. "Is he okay?" Jake asked, sounding genuinely concerned. "He'll recover," Dr. Nerlich said quickly. "Physical reformation typically takes 6 to 8 hours. Psychological recovery is ongoing." Medical technicians rushed to contain Blurp's liquefied remains in a specialized recovery tank. His distress pheromones had reached such intensity that several observers in the gallery were now weeping involuntarily. "Subject 2, Vex continued without missing a beat. Cadet Zix, insectoid species, hive mind derivative with enhanced tactical processing capabilities." Cadet Zix clicked nervously as she approached the chair. Her species resembled what would happen if a praying mantis learned military tactics and developed opposable thumbs. She settled into the scanner with her compound eyes darting around the chamber like she was calculating escape routes. The neural interfaces activated, and for a moment Zix sat perfectly still. Then she started clicking. Fast, rhythmic patterns that sounded almost like Morse code. "What's she saying?" Jake asked with genuine curiosity. Dr. Nerlich consulted a translation device. It roughly translates to error system overflow help me error abort. The clicking intensified until it sounded like a machine gun made of mandibles. Zix's compound eyes began flashing in rapid patterns, while her entire exoskeleton vibrated at frequencies that made the scanning equipment start harmonizing in sympathy. "Subject exhibits acute systematic processing overload," Commander Vex noted, apparently considering this a success. "Neural cascade typical of hive mind derivatives when isolated from collective consciousness." "Why does the scanner do that to them?" Jake asked. "It seems like it's forcing individual consciousness on species that evolved for collective thinking. That's like trying to analyze a single brain cell and wondering why it can't compose poetry." Dr. Nerlich stared at Jake like he'd just discovered fire. That's actually a remarkably astute observation. Individual psychological fitness is paramount in military service, Commander Vex said stiffly. Collective dependencies are weaknesses to be overcome. Or maybe, Jake suggested, they're strengths that you're not measuring correctly. The clicking reached a crescendo that shattered 3 monitoring screens before Zix finally collapsed, twitching intermittently while muttering what the translator rendered as, "System crash reboot required." Medical teams carried her away while Jake watched with the fascination of someone observing an interesting experiment gone wrong. Specimen 3, Vex announced, will be Cadet Murphy of the human species. Recent addition to galactic community, psychological baseline unknown. Jake stood up and stretched. Cool, my turn. Do I need to take off my shoes or anything? The entire gallery went silent. Even the unconscious Zix stopped twitching. Just, Dr. Nerlich said faintly, just sit in the chair, Jake. Jake walked down to the scanner chamber with the casual gait of someone heading to a routine dentist appointment. He settled into the chair and looked around with interest. This is actually pretty comfortable. Good lumbar support. Are those neural interfaces? They look more advanced than anything I've seen in human technology. What's the processing power on this thing? Commander Vex activated the scanner with what could only be described as predatory satisfaction. You're about to find out. The MK7 mind scanner had been designed by the greatest technological minds in the galaxy. It incorporated quantum processing matrices, neural pattern recognition algorithms, and psychological analysis protocols refined through decades of development. It had successfully mapped the consciousness of over 40 different species, from the crystalline thought webs of the shard people to the electromagnetic dream songs of the plasma entities. It was not prepared for Jake Murphy's brain. The initial neural interface connection proceeded normally. The scanner sent out exploratory tendrils of analysis, expecting to encounter the standard architecture of sentient consciousness. Organized memory storage, logical decision-making matrices, emotional regulation systems arranged in predictable patterns. Instead, it found chaos. Not the destructive chaos of madness, but something far more unsettling. Functional chaos. Jake's memories were stored in what could only be described as a psychological junk drawer. Childhood trauma was filed next to random song lyrics. Deeply meaningful life experiences shared space with detailed knowledge of which foods could be safely eaten after their expiration dates. Mathematical formulas coexisted peacefully with emotional reactions to movies about talking dogs. The scanner attempted to catalog this information according to standard psychological classification systems: priority memories, trauma responses, learned behaviors, instinctual reactions. But every time it tried to establish a pattern, Jake's brain would produce something that violated all established rules of cognitive organization. Memory Fragment 2, Aiden 47. Age 7, Jake had fallen off his bicycle and scraped his knee. Standard childhood trauma, easily categorized. But somehow this memory was cross-referenced with 37 other seemingly unrelated files, including his grandmother's recipe for chocolate chip cookies, the lyrics to a pop song from when he was 16, and his opinions about quantum physics. The scanner ran diagnostics on itself, assuming it had encountered a data corruption error. All systems checked out normal. Memory Fragment 15-999. Jake's first kiss, age 15, should have been filed under significant emotional experiences with appropriate romantic context markers. Instead, the scanner found it inexplicably linked to his knowledge of automotive repair, 3 different mathematical theorems, and what appeared to be a comprehensive ranking of breakfast cereals by nutritional value. Fascinating, Commander Vex observed from the gallery. Human neural architecture appears to be processing normally. No signs of distress. That was because Jake wasn't in distress. He was sitting peacefully in the scanner chair, occasionally looking around with mild interest, while his brain cheerfully subjected the galaxy's most advanced psychological analysis tool to what could only be described as cognitive warfare. The scanner encountered a memory of Jake being terrified of spiders, standard phobia response easily understood. But 3 files later it found memories of Jake voluntarily jumping out of airplanes for recreational purposes. The machine attempted to reconcile how someone could be afraid of tiny 8-legged creatures while enthusiastically hurling himself out of aircraft at terminal velocity. System error. Logical contradiction detected. Initiating advanced analysis protocols. The advanced analysis protocols made things worse. Jake's brain contained detailed memories of him crying during sad movies about fictional characters, followed immediately by him laughing hysterically at his own physical injuries. The scanner found records of Jake spending hours researching the most efficient way to organize his sock drawer, then never actually implementing any organizational system. Warning lights began flickering on the scanner's control panels. Deep in Jake's memory banks, the machine discovered something that nearly caused a complete system crash. Jake possessed the ability to hold two completely contradictory beliefs simultaneously and be perfectly comfortable with the cognitive dissonance. He could be absolutely certain that he needed to save money, while also being equally certain that he needed to buy entirely unnecessary items. He could genuinely believe that exercise was important, while also believing that walking to the refrigerator counted as sufficient physical activity. The scanner's quantum processors began running hot as they attempted to map this psychological paradox. But the real system killer was when the machine encountered human creativity. Jake's memories contained detailed records of him imagining things that didn't exist, then figuring out ways to make them exist. Not just practical inventions, but utterly ridiculous concepts that somehow worked anyway. The scanner found memories of humans who had looked at the ocean and thought, "I should cross that in a floating wooden box." Humans who had observed birds and concluded, "I should do that, but with metal and explosions." Humans who had encountered the vacuum of space and decided, "That looks like a nice place to visit." System overload warnings began cascading across every monitoring screen. "Commander," Dr. Nerlich said nervously, "the scanner appears to be experiencing some technical difficulties." Smoke was beginning to rise from several processing units as the machine encountered what could only be described as the core of human psychology. Jake's brain contained extensive records of humans looking at obviously dangerous situations and thinking, "Hold my beer." The scanner attempted one final analysis protocol, diving deep into Jake's fundamental decision-making processes. What it found there caused what could only be described as a mechanical nervous breakdown. Humans, the scanner realized with something approaching electronic horror, made most of their important decisions based on absolutely no logical framework whatsoever. They used gut feelings, and it seemed like a good idea at the time in YOLO, as valid reasoning for life-altering choices. And somehow, inexplicably, this approach worked. The scanner's cooling systems kicked into overdrive as it tried to process this final, impossible contradiction. A species that succeeded despite being completely irrational. That's when the real alarms started going off. The MK7 mind scanner had been designed to handle the most complex psychological architectures in the known galaxy. It had processing power equivalent to a small moon, quantum matrices capable of modeling consciousness across 17 different dimensional frameworks, and enough computational redundancy to analyze the dreams of a crystalline hive mind, while simultaneously mapping the electromagnetic thoughts of a plasma entity. None of that prepared it for the moment when it discovered that humans found their own suffering hilarious. Deep in Jake's memory cores, the scanner encountered what it initially classified as traumatic experiences. Humans falling down, getting injured, failing spectacularly at simple tasks. Standard trauma markers, the machine assumed, until it analyzed Jake's emotional responses to these memories. He was laughing. Not just mild amusement, but genuine deep satisfaction at watching members of his own species experience pain and embarrassment. The scanner's ethical subroutines immediately flagged this as potential sociopathic behavior, until it discovered that humans called this comedy and considered it essential for psychological well-being. Error cascade initiated. Logical framework collapse detected. The machine found memories of Jake watching videos specifically designed to showcase human failures. People walking into glass doors, falling off ladders, accidentally setting things on fire through spectacular incompetence. And Jake wasn't just enjoying these. He was sharing them with other humans who also found them hilarious. The scanner attempted to understand this through its xenopsychology protocols. Perhaps humans used mockery of weakness to establish social dominance? No, because Jake's memories showed him laughing just as hard when he was the one falling down the stairs. Maybe humans used humor to process trauma. Partially correct, but the scanner discovered that humans would create entirely fictional scenarios of suffering for entertainment purposes. They wrote stories, made movies, and performed elaborate skits, all designed to make people laugh at others' misery. The cooling systems were working at maximum capacity now, steam rising from quantum processors pushed beyond their design specifications. But the real system killer was when the scanner encountered human creativity working in conjunction with their chaos psychology. Jake's memories contained records of humans who had looked at perfectly functional solutions to problems and thought, "You know what this needs to be unnecessarily complicated and probably dangerous." The machine found memories of humans who had invented things like extreme sports, activities specifically designed to combine physical recreation with significant probability of injury or death. Humans who had looked at the safe, reasonable activity of walking and decided to improve it by adding wheels, or elevation, or the possibility of being attacked by wild animals. System warnings were cascading across every monitoring screen in the chamber now. Dr. Nerlix was frantically checking readings that made no sense according to any known psychological framework. "Commander," he called out, "I'm seeing impossible readings. The scanner is reporting cognitive patterns that violate basic principles of evolutionary psychology." "Explain," Commander Vex demanded, his forearms crossed as smoke began rising from multiple processing units. "It's detecting a species that evolved to actively seek out danger for recreational purposes, while simultaneously being afraid of common household items. A species that creates complex social structures based on shared suffering, but also demonstrates unprecedented cooperation in crisis situations. A species that—" Dr. Nerlix paused, staring at his instruments with growing amazement. "A species that appears to function optimally under conditions that should cause complete psychological breakdown in any rational organism." The scanner, meanwhile, had discovered Jake's memories of human warfare. It expected to find standard military psychology, organized violence, strategic thinking, clear command structures. Instead, it found humans who treated combat like a particularly extreme form of problem-solving, who improvised solutions using whatever materials were available, and who seemed to genuinely enjoy figuring out creative ways to overcome impossible odds. The machine found records of humans who had won battles by pretending to retreat, then attacking from unexpected directions. Humans who had used decoy armies made of scarecrows and mannequins to confuse enemies. Humans who had weaponized farm animals, weather patterns, and on at least one memorable occasion, a flock of chickens. Quantum processors began shutting down as the scanner attempted to reconcile this information with established military doctrine. But the final straw came when the machine discovered that humans had built their entire civilization on a foundation of systematic, organized chaos that somehow produced functional results. Jake's memories contained records of human governments that functioned despite being based on arguments, human economies that thrived on controlled instability, and human scientific advancement that proceeded through a process that could best be described as educated guessing, followed by increasingly expensive experiments. The scanner's central processing matrix attempted one final analysis. How could a species this chaotic have achieved interstellar travel? The answer it found in Jake's memories caused what could only be described as an electronic existential crisis. Humans had reached space not despite their chaos, but because of it. Their willingness to try ridiculous solutions to impossible problems had led to breakthrough after breakthrough that more rational species had never attempted. Every alarm in the scanner chamber was now blaring as the machine's higher cognitive functions began shutting down to prevent permanent damage to its neural networks. "Emergency shutdown," Dr. Nerlix shouted over the cacophony. "The scanner's approaching total system failure." Commander Vex stared in disbelief as the galaxy's most advanced psychological analysis tool slowly succumbed to what could only be described as a mechanical nervous breakdown, all because it had tried to understand one perfectly ordinary human. Jake, meanwhile, sat peacefully in the scanner chair, completely oblivious to the chaos around him. When the neural interfaces finally disengaged with a shower of sparks, he looked around with mild concern. "Is it supposed to smoke like that?" he asked. because I think something might be wrong with your machine. The emergency technicians arrived to find the MK7 mind scanner in what their incident report would later describe as catastrophic analytical failure due to exposure to incompatible cognitive architecture. Half the quantum processors were fried, the neural interface array was sparking intermittently, and the main display screen was stuck showing what appeared to be an error message in 17 different languages, all of which roughly translated to, "What the hell was that?" Jake climbed out of the scanner chair and stretched. "So, did I pass?" Commander Vex stared at him with the expression of someone who had just watched their worldview get fed through a shredder. His forearms hung limply at his sides while his compound eyes struggled to focus on the human who had somehow broken the unbreakable. "The scanner," Vex said slowly, "never completed its analysis." "Oh," Jake nodded. "Should I come back when you get it fixed?" Dr. Nerlix was frantically scribbling notes while reviewing the partial data they'd managed to extract before the system crash. His 23 years of psychological training were warring with readings that shouldn't have been possible according to any known framework of consciousness. "Jake," he said carefully, "according to our preliminary analysis, your psychological profile indicates a species that has somehow achieved advanced civilization despite operating on cognitive principles that should result in immediate extinction." "Yeah, we get that a lot," Jake agreed cheerfully. "Humans are kind of weird. Is there paperwork I need to fill out?" Academy officials were starting to gather, drawn by the smoke and alarms. Dean Quexuthor, a dignified crystalline administrator, materialized in the chamber with the slow, measured movements of someone trying very hard not to shatter from stress. "Commander Vex," Dean Quexuthor's voice resonated like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Perhaps you could explain why our most expensive piece of psychological evaluation equipment is currently resembling a small industrial accident." Before Vex could answer, Dr. Nerlich stepped forward with his hastily compiled notes. "Dean, I believe we've discovered something significant about human psychology. The scanner didn't malfunction. It encountered a cognitive architecture so fundamentally different from established patterns that it couldn't process the data." "Different how?" Dr. Nerlich consulted his notes. "Humans appear to be a species that has weaponized chaos. They've evolved to not just tolerate uncertainty and contradiction, but to actively use it as a problem-solving methodology. The scanner couldn't map their psychology because human psychology doesn't follow mappable patterns." Jake raised his hand. "Question: does this mean I'm cleared for military service? Because I've got a flight simulation exam at 1600, and I still need to grab lunch." The gathered officials stared at him with the collective expression of people trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing shape every time they looked at it. Dean Quexthor turned to Commander Vex. "Your recommendation?" Vex looked at Jake, then at the smoking remains of the scanner, then back at Jake. "I recommend," he said slowly, "that we classify humans as psychologically unquantifiable and proceed with alternative evaluation methods." "Such as?" "We ask them nicely if they think they can handle military service, and hope they're honest about it." Dr. Nerlich was still scribbling furiously. "I'm writing a paper about this. Beyond quantification, species-level cognitive architectures that resist traditional analysis. This could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness diversity in military applications." "Great," Jake said. "Can you put me down as co-author? I've always wanted to be published." 3 months later, the Academy implemented new psychological evaluation protocols. For most species, they continued using advanced scanning technology, albeit with upgraded systems designed to handle more diverse cognitive patterns. For humans, they installed a simple checkbox system. "Are you human? Do you think you can handle military service? Are you sure?" The success rate improved dramatically. Jake graduated third in his class, specializing in improvised solutions to novel problems, a field of study that hadn't existed before humans joined the Academy. His final thesis, "Why the Best Plan is Having No Plan, Adaptive Strategy in Uncertain Environments," here became required reading for command track students. Commander Vex eventually requested transfer to a different department. He now works in military engineering, where he designs equipment specifically intended to be used in ways the manufacturers never anticipated. He finds it oddly relaxing. Dr. Nerlix won the Galactic Psychology Association's Distinguished Research Award for his paper on human cognitive architecture. The scanner incident led to a complete revision of psychological evaluation protocols across 7 star systems. The MK7 mind scanner was eventually repaired and put back into service, but not before technicians installed what they called the human protocol. A simple override switch that would immediately shut down all analysis functions if the machine detected cognitive patterns indicating dangerously high levels of functional chaos. Jake still asks about the cafeteria schedule at inappropriate times, and his fellow officers have learned to check for humans before using phrases like, "This should be simple," or "What could go wrong?" in his presence. But when the Academy faced its first real crisis, a diplomatic incident involving 3 different species, 2 incompatible legal systems, and 1 very confused trade agreement, they called Jake. His solution involved a game of poker, a dinner party, and somehow convincing everyone that the dispute was actually a cultural exchange opportunity. It shouldn't have worked according to any established diplomatic protocol. It worked perfectly. The Academy's new motto, suggested by Jake and reluctantly adopted by the administration, reads, "Semper flexibilis," always flexible. Though Jake insists it should have been "hold my beer," the administration felt that might send the wrong message to prospective students from species who don't ferment beverages. The MK-weight mind scanner is currently under development, with new features designed to handle impossible psychology patterns. The engineering team has requested hazard pay and professional counseling services. Jake volunteers as a test subject whenever his schedule permits. The engineers have politely declined his offers. Some knowledge they've learned is too dangerous to pursue,